Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a really fine new recording of the Sibelius Violin Concerto with James Ehnes and the Bergen Philharmonic under Edward Gardner. And Gardner and Bergen have been doing some really good work lately. You know, their Nielsen symphonies 3 and 4 were quite good, and the concerti were excellent, and they're on a roll. Let's put it that way. They're on Chandos as well. And this is a particularly good disc because, let me see, it's 79 minutes long. Yes, it is. And it contains all of Sibelius's music for violin and orchestra. You would think that people would have done that before now. Usually, the Sibelius comes coupled to something, some other concerto by somebody else, Tchaikovsky or Nielsen or somebody like that. But the value of this disc is the fact that you can get all the Sibelius music for violin and orchestra. And there's more than you think, aside from the concerto. He never wrote anything quite that big or grand. These are all miniatures, the rest of the pieces, but they come in clumps and groups, and they make rather satisfying listening, I have to say. You have to remember, Sibelius was himself a violinist, and he wrote very effectively for that instrument as a soloist. His orchestral writing for the violin section, on the other hand, is a nightmare that violinists hate because it's all tremolos, and he likes to give the tune to the cellos or the woodwinds or anything but the violins. He's like getting revenge on the violins. But, you know, the solo violin stuff is solo violin stuff, and it has that violin-y feel to it, you know, that delight in what the instrument can do. And which Sibelius wished he could have done, but apparently wasn't quite good enough. So he became a genius instead, which is not really a bad deal. Anyway, the Violin Concerto has had a bazillion wonderful recordings, as I've said many times, and I really think that this is it's one of the really good ones. I mean, there are lots of them. We don't have to go down the list. There's just a ton of them. And there's also the original version of the Violin Concerto, which has been recorded now, which we should never, ever have to hear again. The way Sibelius left it and his final thoughts are the best. But beginning with Jascha Heifetz, just about everybody did this concerto, and a lot of them did it extraordinarily well because it is so well written. That doesn't make it easy. It's actually extremely difficult. It's very difficult to coordinate the violin and the orchestral part, as I've pointed out many times. One of the most amazing things, and I've said this before, but the first time I saw it live was with the New Haven Symphony Orchestra, yes, and Diana Jansen playing. And the thing that just amazed me about the piece was how with most violin concertos, you know, even if the orchestra is not very large, it's very hard to hear the solo part often because balance is a major issue. The orchestra very easily overpowers the violin. But with this piece, you hear every single bloody note of the violin, even when the orchestra is really raging and roiling. And the way Sibelius does it is so unbelievably simple, but clever at the same time. The whole orchestral part is low. I mean, it's like never rises above middle C, I like to say. It's a dark, turbulent orchestral part. And occasionally you hear flutes or clarinets, the higher woodwinds, singing along in thirds with the violin. One of the most famous examples is in the finale. You know, when the violin is going da 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 dum bum ba da 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 da. You know, it's not very high. But then it comes da 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 da. The flutes go yeah da 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 like that. You know, so there are gleams of sunshine throughout the piece, and it just works fabulously well. At the end of the first movement, it's amazing. You know, where you know the orchestra's going do 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 do, you know, it's all that low gnarly stuff, and the violin is up here going do 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 do, and you hear the whole thing, even the last note of the first movement, like that. I was amazed. I mean, it just blew me away. It really did. And, you know, solo violin music doesn't usually do that to me. So a recording of it has to be able to preserve that sense where you hear all the violins, but the orchestra doesn't sound inhibited or held back, and the balances are natural. No artificial spotlighting like they do with, like, Yitzhak Perlman recordings, for example. You want to be able to hear the violin in its natural position because you will hear the violin. And it just works. It's amazing. And it's very well done here. It really is. It's a beautiful solo orchestra interaction. And beyond that, Ehnes is a fabulous violinist. He really is. I mean, the first movement is really passionate and wonderfully sung. The slow movement is eloquent, and the part that sounds like the Beethoven Emperor Concerto really soars. Ya da 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 da, when it goes up like that. And the finale is just slamming. It's absolutely terrific. So yeah, I mean, just for the violin concerto, that's worth it. But the other things are wonderful, and they consist of there are 6 Humoresques for violin and orchestra, opus 87 and 89. They date from like 1917, so they're very mature Sibelius, and they're completely charming and delightful. They're only a couple minutes each, but they're chips off the master's bench. They're not throwaway pieces of nonsense. I mean, they really work well. Then there's two pieces, just called Two Earnest Melodies for violin solo and accompaniment, which most people probably never heard, opus 77, and they're lovely. The Two Serenades, opus 69. And then the recent discovery, which was from 1928-29, one of his last works, if not the last work, his suite for violin and string orchestra, which is it's a tiny thing. I mean, it's 7 minutes long and like 3 or 4 movements, 14, 15, 16, 3 movements. Charming and slight, slender, but again, well written and effective, and having it all on one disc is an absolutely great idea. Wonderful. So this, to me, is a no-brainer. You got a first-class recording of the concerto. Everything else is extremely well done, and it's all you'll ever need for the Sibelius music for violin and orchestra. And you may find some surprises that you'll really enjoy. So go for it. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.